Climate change has been one of the most pressing global issues of our time. Yet recently, it seems to have faded from the spotlight. You might remember when the media was saturated with warnings about rising temperatures, extreme weather events, and the urgent need to reduce carbon emissions. But now, it feels like climate change is no longer the burning topic it once was. In this video, we're going to explore why climate change seems to have fallen off the public radar, what's taken its place, and what the consequences of this silence could be for our planet. To understand this shift, we need to look at some data. Between 2006 and 2010, climate change saw a massive surge in media attention, with thousands of articles published each year in major global outlets. In fact, a study by Media Matters for America found that in 2009 alone, the top U.S. news networks mentioned climate change nearly 2,000 times across their combined broadcasts. Compare that to 2021, when media coverage of climate change dropped by over 50%, even though the issue had only become more pressing. According to the same study, during the first half of 2021, the three major U.S. television networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC, aired only 26 total segments about climate change, despite growing global awareness of its consequences. This dramatic decline in coverage is one reason why the issue feels less prominent today. It's not that climate change has disappeared as an issue. The science is clear. Our planet is warming, extreme weather events are becoming more frequent and severe, and the long-term consequences for ecosystems, economies, and societies are dire. Yet despite this, the urgency around climate change in public discourse has diminished. One of the primary reasons for this is the overwhelming focus on other crises that have captured global attention in recent years. The COVID-19 pandemic, for example, was an unprecedented global event that demanded immediate and all-consuming attention. Governments, media, and the public were rightly focused on managing the health crisis, and as a result, other issues, including climate change, were pushed aside. Even now, as the world deals with the aftermath of the pandemic, its economic impacts and other challenges like inflation and war, climate change struggles to regain its prominence in the public eye. Another factor contributing to the decline in climate change discussions is political polarization. In many countries, particularly in the United States, climate change has become a deeply divisive issue. Rather than being seen as a global challenge that requires collective action, it has often been framed through a partisan lens. Some political leaders have cast doubt on the science of climate change, while others have downplayed its importance in favor of economic growth or nationalist agendas. This polarization has made it harder to build the broad political consensus needed to take meaningful action, and in the process, it has dampened public engagement with the issue. When political leaders don't prioritize climate action, it becomes harder for it to stay at the top of the agenda. The complexity of climate change itself also plays a role in why we're not talking about it as much, and unlike more immediate crises, the full effects of climate change unfold slowly over decades or centuries. While we're seeing more frequent wildfires, hurricanes, and floods, many people still feel distant from the most severe impacts of climate change. There's a disconnect between the daily lives of individuals and the abstract, large-scale consequences of global warming. For example, someone in a country that hasn't yet experienced major climate disruptions might not feel the same urgency as someone who's lived through a catastrophic flood or wildfire. This lack of immediacy can make it easier for people to tune out climate discussions, even as the long-term threat looms larger than ever. Then there's the issue of climate fatigue. For years, the media and activists have sounded the alarm about climate change, warning of dire consequences if we fail to act. But for many people, this constant drumbeat of bad news can be overwhelming. Psychologists have documented a phenomenon known as eco-anxiety or climate fatigue, where people feel powerless in the face of such a massive problem. This sense of helplessness can lead to disengagement. People may simply stop paying attention because they feel like there's nothing they can do to make a difference. In a world already filled with stress and uncertainty, it's easier for some to ignore climate change rather than grapple with the fear and guilt that comes with acknowledging it. The rise of other urgent issues has also diverted attention away from climate change. Over the past few years, global political landscapes have been dominated by social movements, economic upheavals, and geopolitical conflicts. Issues like racial justice, immigration, economic inequality, and authoritarianism have demanded the world's focus. While these are critical challenges that deserve attention, their prominence in public discourse has often come at the expense of climate change discussions. When there are so many pressing issues competing for attention, It's difficult for any one topic, no matter how important, to dominate the conversation for long. Furthermore, climate change has become a victim of its own complexity. While the general consensus among scientists is clear, human activity is driving climate change, there are many layers to the conversation that can be difficult for the average person to engage with. Policy debates about carbon pricing, renewable energy, and international climate agreements often seem technical or remote from everyday life. This complexity can create a barrier to public engagement, as people may feel that the issue is too complicated for them to fully understand or that solutions are out of their control. As a result, the climate conversation has sometimes struggled to remain accessible and compelling to a broad audience. Another reason why we're not talking about climate change as much is the emergence of short-term political and economic crises. Take inflation, for example. As the cost of living rises, people become more focused on their immediate financial concerns, how to afford groceries, pay rent, or cover healthcare costs, than on long-term environmental challenges. When economic stability is threatened, voters often prioritize issues that have a more immediate impact on their lives, like jobs and taxes. Politicians, in turn, respond to these concerns, focusing on short-term solutions to economic problems rather than long-term strategies to combat climate change. This focus on the here and now makes it harder to build the political will for sustained climate action. Media coverage also plays a significant role in shaping public discourse, and in recent years, climate change has been crowded out by other headlines. News cycles have become increasingly fast-paced, and stories about natural disasters or climate policies may not generate as much attention as stories about political scandals, celebrity drama, or the latest tech innovations. While some outlets continue to prioritize climate reporting, the issue doesn't always get the sustained, in-depth coverage needed to keep it in the forefront of public consciousness. As a result, the urgency around climate change can fade from view, even as the problem continues to worsen. Despite the seeming decline in climate discussions, there are signs that the conversation could make a resurgence. Younger generations, in particular, are more engaged with climate issues than ever before. Movements like Fridays for Future, led by young activists like Greta Thunberg, have helped keep climate change on the global agenda. These movements are pushing for more aggressive action from governments and corporations, and their voices are growing louder. As the impacts of climate change become more visible and unavoidable, it's likely that public attention will once again turn to the issue. The challenge will be maintaining that focus and turning concern into sustained action. In conclusion, the reason we're not talking about climate change as much today is not because the problem has gone away. It's because other crises, political polarization, and climate fatigue have crowded it out. But the risks of ignoring climate change are enormous. If we continue to delay action, the impacts of global warming will only become more severe, affecting future generations in profound and irreversible ways. While the climate conversation may have quieted down for now, it's clear that this is an issue we cannot afford to ignore.